Hi, I'm Warren Hayes. On Christmas Eve, my parents opened the massive front door of our Hillsborough mansion and threw my single suitcase onto the frozen marble steps. My little sister, Tara, stood right behind them, arms folded, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "Let's see how you survive now, big sis," she said. I dragged that suitcase through thick, icy fog. No money, no car, nothing left except the long cashmere coat keeping me alive. I collapsed onto a snow-dusted park bench inside our gated neighborhood, shaking so hard my teeth wouldn't stop chattering. That's when she appeared, an old woman, barefoot, skin turning purple, silver hair whipping in the wind. She looked like the cold had already claimed her. Without thinking twice, I stood up, took off my only warm coat and wrapped it around her trembling shoulders. She grabbed my freezing hands, looked straight into my eyes, and whispered, "Kindness like yours is rarer than diamonds." Then she walked away and vanished into the fog. Exactly 1 hour later, 19 black luxury sedans rolled up in perfect silence and blocked the entire street. The same woman stepped out of the middle car. Same face, but now she wore a floor-length camel coat hair and an elegant Shinnon diamonds flashing at her wrist. She walked straight to me, smiled, and said only one sentence. "I've been watching you long enough to know exactly who you really are." If you've ever been thrown away by the people who are supposed to love you most, drop "been there" or the city you're watching from in the comments. So I know I'm not alone. Trust me, keep watching. What happens next will blow your mind. That afternoon, I was still in shock from the layoff email that landed at 10:00 a.m., another round of restructuring at the San Francisco ad agency I'd given 6 years to. I packed my desk plant into the passenger seat of my 12-year-old Honda Civic and pointed it south on 101 toward Hillsborough. 32 47 minutes if traffic was kind. It wasn't. I'd already called Mom from the parking garage. "Just need to crash for a couple weeks while I figure things out," I told her. She sounded distracted, said dinner was at 7 and hung up. When I pulled through the gates, the house looked like a magazine cover. 15T noble fir in the 2-story foyer. White orchids everywhere, the caterers in black ties setting the dining table for 20. Dad Richard was uncoring a 2005 Dom Perignon like it was Tuesday. Mom Margaret was fastening a new South Sea pearl choker that definitely wasn't there last month. And Tara, my 27-year-old sister, was twirling in a backless red silk dress, flashing a 6-carat radiant cut diamond on her left hand like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. Derek, my ex of 4 years, stood behind her with his arm around her waist. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door and tried to smile. "Hey everyone, bad day at work." That was all I got out. Tara spun around, eyes wide with fake concern. "Oh my God, again." She gasped loud enough for the caterers to hear. "Third job in 4 years, right?" She turned to Mom. Remember when she got fired from the startup in Soma for not being a team player? Mom's lips tightened. Dad didn't even look up from his champagne. I felt my face burn. It was a reduction in force. They let go of the entire creative team. Tara waved her new ring in my direction. Derek just closed his series. A $28 million pre-money. Investors love him. Derek gave me that same smug half smile he used when he ended things 2 years ago with "It's not you, it's timing." Dad finally set his glass down. "Murren, we need to talk." He didn't motion for me to sit. He never did when it was bad news. He told me straight last month he'd amended the family trust. All of it, $38 million in principal, was now in Tara's name only. Irrevocable. Signed, notarized, filed with the estate attorney in Palo Alto. He said I was 32 capable, and it was time I stood on my own. Mom added, "We can't keep funding a lifestyle that doesn't produce results, as if my salary had ever paid for their orchids or Tara's Birkins." I stood there, mouth open, trying to process that my own parents had just legally disinherited me while I was still standing in their foyer. Tara pulled out her phone, already recording. "This is gold." She laughed. "Big sis comes home broke on Christmas Eve. Say something for my followers." I looked at Dad. "You're serious?" He met my eyes for the first time all night. "Cold. Final. You have 20 minutes to pack what you need. Security will let you back in tomorrow for the rest if you make an appointment." Mom wouldn't even look at me. She busied herself adjusting a gold ornament on the tree. I walked upstairs on autopilot. The bedroom I'd had since I was 10 still had my high school swim team photos on the wall. I threw jeans, 2 sweaters, laptop, and toiletries into the old Louis Vuitton Weekender. Tara hadn't stolen yet. Everything else, books, yearbooks, the framed Stanford diploma, would have to wait. When I came back down, Tara was live on Instagram narrating like a wildlife documentary. And here comes the prodigal daughter with one sad suitcase. Any bets on how long before she's sleeping and that civic dad opened the front door himself? The fog had rolled in thick. I couldn't see the end of the driveway. Temperature was already dropping below freezing. I stepped over the threshold. Behind me, Tara called out, "Sweet as poison. Merry Christmas, Murian, don't freeze." The door closed with a soft, expensive click. The alarm beeped twice as it armed. And that was it. In under 30 minutes, I went from daughter to trespasser in the only home I'd ever known. I stood on the marble steps in the dark, one suitcase at my feet, wearing the only warm thing I still owned, that long cashmere coat. The second that heavy door sealed behind me, everything went quiet except the blood pounding in my ears. I stood on the empty street trying to breathe, but the air felt like knives. My mind kept replaying Dad's flat voice, 38 million gone, with one signature and Mom refusing to meet my eyes. I was 32 years old, and in one conversation, I had become a stranger to the only family I'd ever had. I started walking because standing still felt worse. The wheels on the suitcase rattled over the perfect pavement, the only sound for miles. Every mansion I passed had warm golden windows and laughter spilling out Christmas trees glowing behind gated driveways. Each one reminded me I no longer belonged anywhere. My fingers were already numb. I kept thinking this can't be real. Any minute Mom would open the door and call me back, say it was a cruel joke. But the alarm stayed armed. No footsteps, nothing. I don't know how long I walked, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour, until I found myself in the little public garden beside the old Episcopal church. There was one iron bench under a street lamp that actually worked. I sat down hard, dropped the suitcase handle, and finally let the tears come. I cried for the little girl who used to hide under that 15T tree waiting for Santa. I cried for every birthday where Tara got the bigger present and I was told to be grateful. I cried because I had always believed that if I just worked harder, achieved more, they would finally see me. Turns out none of it mattered. I wasn't disposable because I failed. I was disposable because I wasn't Tara. The tears froze on my cheeks. I hugged my knees to my chest and stared at the ground, trying to figure out how I was going to survive the night, let alone the rest of my life. That was when I heard the slow scrape of bare feet on concrete. I looked up and saw her, an elderly woman, shuffling toward the bench. Silver hair tangled and loose, thin shoulders hunched against the windskin, so pale it looked translucent under the lamp. She stopped a few feet away, swaying slightly, and spoke in a voice rough from cold. "Young lady, do you know if any of the shelters still have room tonight? I've been walking up from Burlingame. Everything's full." I wiped my face quickly. "I'm sorry, I don't have anywhere either." She studied me for a long moment, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. Then she lowered herself onto the bench beside me, leaving a careful distance. We sat in silence while her breathing steadied. I noticed her feet were bare and already pasted purple heading toward that scary white that means the damage is deep. Something inside me cracked open. Here was someone who had even less than I did tonight, and she was still polite enough to ask instead of demand. I felt ashamed of my own self-pity. Without saying anything, I stood up, slipped off the only thing keeping me from freezing and draped it around her shoulders. She looked startled, then closed her eyes as the warmth hit her. Her hands, thin-veined, trembling, reached up and pulled the fabric tighter. She turned to me, tears shining in those pale blue eyes. "What's your name, child Muran?" I answered, voice cracking. She repeated it softly like she was tasting something precious. "Thank you, Muran." Then she did something I'll never forget. She took both my icy hands in hers, squeezed once, and held my gaze for a long time, no words, just understanding, passing between two strangers who suddenly weren't strangers anymore. After what felt like forever, she let go, stood up with new steadiness, and gave me the smallest smile. She walked away, slowly swallowed by the night before I could even think to call after her. I sat back down alone, colder than I had ever been in my life, teeth chattering so hard my jaw hurt. But for the first time since the door closed, the ache in my chest felt different, lighter, like giving away the last thing I had somehow gave me something back I didn't know I was missing. The motel room smelled like old cigarettes and cheap pine cleaner. I had been staring at the same Indeed page for hours, applying to anything that paid above minimum wage when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Miss Muran Hayes. The woman's voice was crisp professional with a faint East Coast clip. "This is Grace O'Neill calling on behalf of Mrs. Alina Calloway. She would like to meet you immediately." I laughed out loud, actually laughed because it sounded like a prank. Who is this really? The line stayed silent for 2 beats. Mrs. Calloway will explain everything. A car is waiting outside room 112. I looked through the peephole. 19 identical black BMW 760s lined the cracked parking lot like a presidential motorcade. The lead car's rear door opened by itself. I grabbed my keys and walked out in the same jeans and hoodie I'd worn for 2 days. She was waiting in the middle car, the woman from the bench. Hair now in a flawless, low chignon camel hair coat cinched at the waist, red-soled heels. Catching the sun, she looked 78 going on ageless Etan, she said gently. As if we were old friends, the door closed with a soft thud, partition rose. We pulled away 20 minutes later, the gates opened to a 1920s Tudor mansion on a quiet cul-de-sac in Atherton hidden behind redwoods, and a 10FT hedge I had driven past this street 1,000 times and never knew it existed. Inside smelled of cedar and roses. A fire crackled in a stone hearth big enough to stand in. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked over a private lake. She motioned for me to sit on a cream sofa that probably cost more than my car. A butler poured tea neither of us touched. "My full name is Eleanor Calloway," she began. "My late husband founded Calloway Commercial Really. When he passed 12 years ago, I took the company private and turned the profits into the Calloway Family Foundation. We own or finance over 400 million square ft of office and retail space across the country. The foundation distributes roughly $120 million a year." I just stared. My brain couldn't process the numbers. She leaned forward. "Every Christmas Eve for the last 25 years, I do one thing the same. I leave the estate dressed as someone who has nothing. No security visible, no wallet, no phone. I walk until I find someone who still has a heart when they believe no one is watching. Most years I walk all night and go home disappointed. This year I found you." She explained that after I walked away, her security team, plain clothes parked 2 blocks over, had kept eyes on me from a distance for 48 hours. They watched me check into the motel with cash, eat, vending machine, food, apply to 50 jobs in one sitting, cry in the shower, and never once try to find out who the homeless woman was or brag about the good deed. "You're the first person in 15 years, she said quietly, "who gave away the last thing keeping them alive without expecting anything back. I need to know if that was a fluke or who you really are." She stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind her back. "I have no children, no heirs. When I'm gone, strangers on a board will decide where my money goes. I don't want that. I want someone who understands what it feels like to be thrown away on Christmas Eve to decide how we help the next person who gets thrown away." She turned to face me. "I'm offering you a room here, a salary, and a 5-year apprenticeship. If at the end you're the person I believe you are, the foundation becomes yours to run. Not a gift, a responsibility." I opened my mouth closed. It opened it again. Why was all I managed, because she said, eyes suddenly fierce, "I know exactly what it feels like to sit on a freezing bench with nowhere to go and still choose kindness. I was 29 when my own father did it to me. I promised myself if I ever got the chance, I'd make sure no one who chose right in that moment stayed lost." She extended her hand. "So Muran Hayes, will you come home with me?" I moved into the East Wing the following Monday. My new bedroom was bigger than my parents' entire downstairs, with French doors opening onto a rose garden I could actually smell from bed. Grace O'Neill, tall, silver-haired, zero nonsense, handed me a leather binder the thickness of a phone book and said, "Welcome to boot camp." The first month was brutal. 6 a.m. runs around the lake with a leaner's former Navy SEAL trainer. 7:30 breakfast meetings where I learned to read a 999 DPF tax return faster than most CPAs. 9:00 a.m. to 6 p.m. sitting beside a leaner in board meetings at the foundation's offices on Sand Hill Road, taking notes while billionaires argued over impact metrics. Evenings were spent dissecting 20 years of grant archives until my eyes burned. A leaner didn't want another rich kid playing philanthropist. She wanted someone who could turn dollars into changed lives without wasting a cent. Her favorite line became, "We don't give fish. We don't even give fishing lessons. We buy the whole damn river and make sure everyone can eat forever." She enrolled me in Stanford Graduate School of Business's executive program for nonprofit leaders. Full tuition covered, no questions asked. 3 nights a week, I drove the 5 miles to campus, sat in classrooms with executives twice my age, and learned how to measure outcomes instead of intentions. Weekends meant site visits, battered women's shelters in East Oakland, after-school programs in East San Jose, veteran housing projects in the Central Valley. I interviewed mothers who had escaped abuse with nothing but their kids and a garbage bag of clothes. I listened to teenagers explain how one safe place to do homework kept them from joining gangs. Every story carved itself into me. Back at the estate, Grace drilled me on governance. How to handle a rogue board member. How to say no to a senator's pet project without losing federal matching funds. How to fire a grantee caught embezzling without triggering a PR nightmare. I rewrote the entire grant application process from scratch. Shorter forms, faster decisions, mandatory site visits within 30 days of approval. Alina read every draft and bled red ink all over them, then made me defend each change in front of the full board. There were nights I fell asleep at the kitchen island with my face on a spreadsheet. There were mornings I cried in the shower because I felt like an imposter who would never be good enough. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered sitting on that freezing bench with nothing, and I kept going. June arrived hot and sudden. One Thursday morning, Alina texted library. Now, I walked in expecting another 12-hour strategy session. Instead, she was alone, sunlight pouring through stained glass windows, holding a single folder. She didn't sit. She slid the folder across the mahogany table and stayed standing. Inside was an employment agreement on heavy cream talk. Title: President and Chief Executive Officer, Callaway Family Foundation. Reporting line directly to the board, meaning her until she decided otherwise. Base salary $195 million. $3% equity in the foundation's endowment, currently valued at just under $4 billion. Full decision-making authority over all programs starting year 3, subject only to fiduciary duty. I looked up speechless. She finally sat folding her hands like she was praying. I didn't bring you here because you gave away a coat, she said. Anyone can be generous for 5 minutes when a camera might be watching. I watched you for 5 straight months. I watched you fight for a domestic violence shelter that every banker in the room wanted to defund because the numbers looked messy. I watched you sit on a folding chair in Oakland until midnight listening to a 17-year-old girl explain why she couldn't go home. I watched you rewrite a 70-page policy manual because one paragraph would have left transgender kids without beds. Her voice cracked just once. You have the mind I need and the heart I lost a long time ago. The foundation is yours to run. I'll stay on the board to keep the old man in line, but day-to-day the river belongs to you now. I tried to say thank you, but nothing came out. She waved it off. Sign it before I change my mind and make you finish the endowment tax module first. I laughed through tears and signed. That night we opened a 1982 Chateau Margaux on the terrace, just the two of us watching the sun drop behind the redwoods. She raised her glass. To the girl who had every reason to become bitter and chose kindness anyway. I clink-egged mine against hers. And to the woman who refused to let one good deed stay invisible. We drank. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. October smelled like wet leaves and money in San Francisco. I was in my corner office on the 22nd floor of 300 California Street, reviewing final numbers for the second home campus, when Grace knocked once and opened the door. Your sister and Derek Whittaker are downstairs. No appointment. I felt my stomach drop the way it used to when Tara borrowed my clothes in high school and returned them ruined. I told security to send them up. They walked in looking like they'd rehearsed the performance on the elevator ride. Tara wore a modest navy sheath dress instead of her usual bodkin hair in a low ponytail minimal jewelry. Derek had traded the hoodie and sneakers, found her uniform for a navy suit that almost fit. Both carried the tight smiles of people who had practiced apologies in the mirror. Tara spoke first, voice soft, eyes shiny. Murian, I've been awful. We've been awful. I'm so sorry for everything. For Christmas Eve, for the things I posted, all of it. Derek nodded vigorously. We're getting married next spring, trying to do things the right way this time. I stayed behind my desk, hands folded, and waited. Tara took a breath. Dad's in trouble. Some investments went south. He and Mom might lose the house. And Derek's new company, AI for Elderly Care, just needs $2 million to close the seed round. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death. I raised an eyebrow. Which part is life or death, Dad's mortgage or your valuation? Derek forced a chuckle. Look, I get it. You're big time now.